Yeats, Shadow. I thought grief was the heaviest burden I could bear. I was wrong. May God forgive what I have done, and may Thomas finally find the peace I stole from him. Sarah Blackwood, November 1868. Emma closed the book gently. Tomorrow she would return to Boston, to her academic life, to a world where the dead stayed buried and the land held no malevolence. But she knew Stillwater Farm would haunt her dreams for years to come. And sometimes, when the wind rustled through dry leaves or whispered through tall grass, she would remember Thomas Blackwood's final words, "The land is free," as was he, at last. 3 months later, Emma stood at the podium in the university conference hall, presenting her dissertation findings to her committee and a small audience of fellow academics. Her research on agricultural production in 19th century New England had been well received, with particular praise for her detailed case study of several Massachusetts farms. She had not mentioned Stillwater Farm. In conclusion, Emma said, the transition from subsistence to market farming represented not just an economic shift, but a profound change in how rural New Englanders related to their land. What had once been a direct connection, my labor, my food, became mediated by market forces and agricultural specialization. As the polite applause faded and the question period began, Emma noticed a familiar figure entering at the back of the hall. Harold, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed a size too large, gave her a small wave. Later, at the reception, he approached with a manila envelope in hand. "Congratulations, Dr. Larson," he said with a smile. "Not quite yet," Emma replied. "Still have to defend next month, but it's looking promising." She gestured around at the mingling academics. "I'm surprised to see you here. It's a long way from Millfield." "I had business in Boston anyway," Harold said, though a slight fidget suggested otherwise. "And I found something I thought you should see." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper article from the Millfield Gazette, dated 2 weeks prior. "Archaeological dig reveals unusual findings at abandoned farm," read the headline. Emma scanned the article quickly. A team from the State Historical Preservation Office had begun preliminary work at Stillwater Farm, planning to document the site before potential development of the land. Their initial findings included unusually fertile soil throughout the property, soil that, according to preliminary tests, had been barren and contaminated less than a year earlier. Most intriguing was the discovery in the small family cemetery. Ground-penetrating radar had revealed that one grave, Thomas Blackwood's, contained a properly buried body in a coffin consistent with 1868 burial practices. This contradicted local legends that Blackwood had somehow survived his reported death or had been buried elsewhere. "The land is healing," Emma said quietly, looking up at Harold. "Just like we hoped." Harold nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag containing what appeared to be soil samples. "They found these too, scattered around the property," he said. The preservation team thought they were just old buttons or coins at first. Emma opened the bag and tipped the contents into her palm. 3 small round objects that looked like tarnished metal discs. As she brushed away decades of accumulated dirt, she could make out faint lettering on one. "Millfield Agricultural Fair, 1868. Not buttons or coins. Medallions. Prize medallions. Identical to the one that had been pinned to Thomas Blackwood's chest in the newspaper photograph. "But we burned the ribbon," Emma said, confusion evident in her voice. "The ribbon, yes," Harold replied. "But apparently Thomas received medallions as well. 3 of them, for different categories." The newspaper only mentioned the ribbon. Emma felt a chill, despite the warm reception hall. Does this mean, could he still be bound to them? Could he come back? Harold shook his head. "I don't think so. According to your research in the grandmother's book, once the main anchor is broken, the ribbon, in this case in the grave, is sanctified with salt. The connection is severed permanently." He paused. "Still, I thought you should know." Emma closed her hand around the medallions, feeling their weight. Physical proof that Thomas Blackwood had indeed attended the agricultural fair after his death. Evidence of the impossible. "What will you do with them?" Harold asked. Emma considered for a moment. "Return them to Millfield. They're part of your town's history. The real history, not just what's in the official record." She carefully placed the medallions back in the bag. "But first, I might hold on to them a little longer. There's something I want to check." Later that night in her apartment, Emma cleared her dining table and laid out her research materials. The medallions gleamed dully under her desk lamp as she consulted her notes in the leather-bound book of rituals. The book had mentioned tokens of earthly attachment needing to be destroyed. They had assumed the ribbon was the primary token, but what if these medallions were equally important? What if the ritual had only been partially successful? Emma thought back to Stillwater Farm, to the feeling of the land healing, to Thomas Blackwood's final whispered words. "The land is free." No, she decided. Thomas was truly at rest. The ritual had worked. These medallions were just artifacts now, their power, if they ever had any, long gone. Still, as Emma prepared for bed that night, she found herself placing the medallions in a small wooden box lined with salt just to be safe. In her dreams, she walked through fields of golden wheat that whispered in a voice almost, but not quite, human. The land endures. 1 year later. Emma stood in her new office at Morrisville College, unpacking books and arranging her desk. The small liberal arts school had offered her a tenure-track position teaching American history, with particular focus on rural and agricultural development. Her dissertation, now published by the university press, had been well received in academic circles. She had carefully omitted any mention of revenants or ritual books, focusing instead on the economic and social aspects of New England farming communities. A gentle knock on her doorframe pulled her attention from arranging books. "Package for you, Dr. Larson," said the department secretary, holding out a small parcel. The return address was the Millfield Historical Society. Inside was a note from Harold, along with a small archival box. The note was brief. "Emma found this while reorganizing the photography collection. Thought you should have it. No one here will miss it, and I think you'll understand its significance. Best, Harold P.S. Stillwater Farm has been purchased by a conservation trust. It will remain undeveloped, just wild land returning to forest. Seems fitting." Emma opened the archival box carefully. Inside, protected by acid-free tissue paper, was a daguerreotype she had never seen before. It showed the Blackwood family, Thomas, Sarah, and their 2 children, posed formally in front of their farmhouse. Unlike most photographs from that era, this one had been taken outdoors, capturing Stillwater Farm in its prime. Fields of wheat stretched into the distance. A prosperous barn stood proudly behind the house, and fruit trees in full bloom framed the scene. The Blackwoods themselves looked happy, or as happy as people could look, while maintaining the serious expressions required by long exposure times. Thomas stood tall and proud, one hand resting on his wife's shoulder. Sarah sat in a chair, the children on either side of her. All wore their Sunday best. Emma turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faded ink, was a simple inscription: "The Blackwood Family. Stillwater Farm, April 1st, 1868. The day before Thomas fell ill. The family's last moment of true happiness, captured forever." Emma placed the photograph carefully on her desk, propping it against her computer monitor. A reminder of the family before tragedy struck, before grief and desperation led Sarah to reach beyond the veil. As the afternoon light caught the daguerreotype, Emma could almost imagine the wheat fields swaying in a gentle breeze, the fruit trees scattering blossoms, the family moving through their daily lives, unaware of what lay ahead, but complete in that moment. This was how she would remember them. Not as a hollow-eyed revenant or a grief-stricken widow, but as they had been, a family bound to their land by love, not by ritual or obligation. Outside her office window, autumn leaves drifted down from ancient campus oaks. In a few weeks, farmers throughout the region would complete their harvests, following traditions that stretched back to Thomas Blackwood's time and beyond. The land endured, as it always had. But now it held one less restless soul. 5 years passed. Emma's career flourished at Morrisville College. She earned tenure, published articles, mentored students. The events at Stillwater Farm receded in her memory, taking on the quality of a vivid dream, impossible yet too detailed to discount entirely. She kept in touch with Harold through occasional emails and Christmas cards. The Blackwood family photograph remained on her desk, a conversation piece when colleagues visited her office. "Research for my book on farming communities," she would explain, never mentioning the true significance of the image. The medallions stayed in their salt-lined box, tucked away in her bedroom closet. Sometimes she would take them out, examining their tarnished surfaces in the light, reminding herself that the impossible had, for a brief time, broken through into her orderly academic world. Then came the email from Harold that changed everything. "Emma, I hate to bother you, but something's happening at Stillwater. The Conservation Trust people have reported unusual soil patterns appearing in the old field's geometric shapes that weren't there before. And a hiker claims he saw someone working the land at dusk last week. It's probably nothing. Natural formations, an unauthorized camper. But I thought you should know." Emma stared at her computer screen for a long time. It couldn't be Thomas. They had released him. The land had been healing. But what if they had missed something? What if the medallion still tied him to Stillwater somehow? She pulled up the Conservation Trust's website and found recent drone photographs of the property. Sure enough, distinct patterns were visible in what should have been random forest regrowths, straight lines forming rectangles and squares, as if invisible hands had been clearing and tilling the soil. 2 days later, Emma found herself driving the familiar route to Millfield, the salt-lined box of medallions on the passenger seat beside her. Harold met her at the Historical Society, his face more lined than she remembered, his step a little slower. "I'm probably overreacting," he said after they exchanged greetings, "but I couldn't shake the feeling that we might have unfinished business out there." "Better to be sure," Emma agreed. "I brought the medallions. If they're still binding him somehow, we need to destroy them properly this time." They set out for Stillwater Farm the next morning. The Conservation Trust had improved the access road, making it possible to drive almost to the property itself. As they parked and gathered their supplies, salt, kindling, a small metal bowl for burning, Emma felt the familiar pressure behind her eyes, the heaviness in the air. The farmhouse foundations came into view as they crested a small hill. Emma stopped short, breath catching in her throat. The ruins had been cleared of undergrowth. The stone outline was clearly visible now, almost as if someone had been maintaining it. Beyond, in what had once been fields, the wild growth had been partially cleared in distinct rectangular patterns, just as the drone photos had shown. "Someone's been working here," Harold whispered unnecessarily. Emma approached the foundations cautiously. No crude altar stood in the center now. Instead, she found a small stone bench, seemingly constructed from pieces of the original farmhouse. On it lay a bouquet of wildflowers, fresh enough to have been placed there that morning. "This doesn't feel like Thomas," Emma said slowly. "This feels ... different." They continued toward the family cemetery. The forest had reclaimed much of the path, but it was still discernible, as if regularly traveled. The iron fence around the cemetery had been repaired, the gate hanging properly on new hinges. Inside, the gravestones had been cleaned, the ground weeded and tended. Thomas Blackwood's marker gleamed in the morning light, the inscription clear and sharp. Fresh flowers, the same variety as those on the stone bench, lay at its base. "Someone's taking care of this place," Harold said. "But who? And why?" A twig snapped in the forest behind them. Emma turned quickly, half expecting to see Thomas Blackwood's decayed form. Instead, a young woman stood at the cemetery gate, a basket of gardening tools on her arm. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that widened in surprise at finding strangers at the graves. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "We're from the Millfield Historical Society," Harold said quickly, which wasn't entirely untrue. "Just documenting the site. I'm Harold Peters, and this is Dr. Emma Larson." The young woman visibly relaxed. "Oh, you're the ones who wrote about Stillwater in the County Historical Journal. I read your article." She stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Elizabeth Chun. I'm the new caretaker for the Conservation Trust lands." Emma shook her hand, noting the dirt under her fingernails and the calluses of someone who worked regularly with the land. "You've been maintaining the cemetery?" Elizabeth nodded, setting down her basket. "And clearing some of the original field patterns. It's part of the Trust's mission to preserve historical agricultural layouts." She smiled, looking around the small cemetery. "But I admit I've taken a special interest in Stillwater. There's something about this place, ... How long have you been working here?" Harold asked. "About 6 months. I have a degree in ecological restoration, with a focus on historically significant landscapes." Elizabeth knelt to adjust the flowers at Thomas's grave. "When I learned about Stillwater's history, what's documented of it anyway, I felt drawn to the place." Emma exchanged a glance with Harold. "Have you ever experienced anything unusual here? Unexplainable?" Elizabeth looked up, her expression unreadable. "You mean the legends? The ghost stories?" She stood, brushing soil from her knees. "I've heard them. Everyone in Millfield has. And..." Emma prompted. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, seeming to decide how much to share. "I've never seen a ghost, if that's what you're asking. But there is something special about this land." She gestured toward the fields beyond the cemetery. "The soil here shouldn't be as fertile as it is, not after decades of abandonment. Yet everything I plant thrives. It's like the land itself is eager to produce again." Emma felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The patterns in the fields, the maintenance of the cemetery, all had a perfectly rational explanation. Elizabeth Chun was simply doing her job, with perhaps a touch more dedication than required. "The Trust is planning to establish a small educational farm here," Elizabeth continued, "using historical methods to grow heritage crops. A living museum of sorts." She looked directly at Emma. "Actually, I've been hoping to speak with you. Your research on 19th century farming practices would be invaluable to the project." They spent the next hour walking the property with Elizabeth, who pointed out her restoration work and plans for the future. The old well had been found and capped for safety. Foundation stones from the collapsed barn had been repurposed to create low walls defining garden spaces. Throughout it all, there was no sense of dread, no oppressive atmosphere, just a peaceful old farm being gently reclaimed. As they prepared to leave, Emma made a decision. She took the salt-lined box from her backpack and approached Elizabeth. "These belong here," she said, opening the box to reveal the medallions. They were Thomas Blackwood's prizes from the 1868 agricultural fair. The Historical Society thought they should return to Stillwater. Elizabeth's eyes widened as she carefully lifted one of the medallions. "This is incredible. We've been researching what crops were historically grown here. This confirms wheat was the primary product." She looked up at Emma, genuine gratitude in her expression. "Thank you. These will be perfect for our educational displays." As Emma and Harold drove away from Stillwater Farm, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds to illuminate the clearing, Emma felt a sense of completion she hadn't expected. "It wasn't Thomas," she said as they turned onto the main road. "Just a dedicated conservationist and some unusual soil patterns." Harold nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. "Still, it's strange how she's drawn to the place. How everything she plants thrives there now." "The land is healing," Emma repeated her words from years earlier. "Maybe that's all we're seeing." "Maybe," Harold agreed. "Or maybe Thomas is finally doing what he always wanted, helping the land prosper, but in a healthy way this time." Emma smiled at the thought. She pictured the farm as it had been in the daguerreotype fields of wheat stretching to the horizon, fruit trees in bloom, the Blackwood family standing proud before their home. Then she imagined it as it might be again someday, a living museum, heritage crops swaying in the breeze, visitors learning about the past. "The land endures," she murmured. And somewhere perhaps Thomas Blackwood was at peace, knowing that Stillwater Farm would thrive once more.